So good morning and afternoon to you all who are connected for this event, the side event of this United Nations Statistical Commission on Enhancing Financing for Development Data, Progress and Innovations in Implementing the Cape Town Global Action Plan for Sustainable Development Data. Very warm welcome to all of you. My name is Jure Yada and I'm the coordination lead of the Bern Network on Financing Data for Development. And I'm very pleased to be facilitating today's discussion. Now, we have a very exciting and full agenda ahead of us, but just before we get started, I wanted to cover some of the few usual housekeeping points before virtual events. I know we're all very familiar with them, so I will keep things brief. Firstly, regarding your names in the participant list, we would kindly like to request that you rename yourselves if you have not already done so, so that we can see which organization you're coming from, followed by your full name, which will help us identify you during the Q&A discussion. As you can see, this is in webinar format, so your microphones and cameras will be disabled for everybody but the participants. So I encourage you all to actively use the Q&A and chat functions throughout the event to share your comments and questions. We'll be actively checking them and engaging with you there. And finally, this event will be recorded and a link will be made available afterwards for those who cannot join us due to time zone or other reasons. So without further ado, I would like to welcome and pass the floor on to our first speaker, Mr. Stefan Schweinfest, who's the director of the United Nations Statistics Division, for his opening remarks. So Stefan, please, the floor is yours.
Hello, thank you very much, Jure, and hello, good morning from New York, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I already just started the day with a heart attack because I didn't follow Jure's instructions, so I didn't put my affiliation on my name. But I'm from the United Nations Statistics Division, and it's my pleasure to work with my team to facilitate the UN Statistical Commission session, which will be starting in the first week of March. But all of these side events are trying to get us in the mood and get us excited about the world meeting of statistical leaders in the beginning of March. So today, we are going to talk about money. Actually, I was just thinking this morning in the shower, perhaps we should have played Pink Floyd's Money in the background in order to get us really in the mood here. Yes, the title of this session is Enhancing Financing for Development Data, Progress and Innovation for Implementation of the CTGAP. Now, we at the United Nations love our acronyms. So, I mean, this is the Cape Town Global Action Plan for Sustainable Development Data. Let me tell you a little bit about the background here. We have the Sustainable Development Goals as a big policy agenda, and that, of course, has only increased the appetite for data around the world in every country. So there is now a lot of demand on the national statistical offices, on the national statistical systems. And then we said, how are we going to do that? Increased demand, limited resources. So we created this high-level group on partnership, coordination, capacity building, the HLG-PCCB, another acronym. And this is a group of dedicated chief statisticians who are thinking about how to implement the development data. And financing is, of course, a big component of this. And one thing we did is we organized World Data Fora in South Africa 2017 and then 18 in Dubai. And the Cape Town Global Action Plan was the outcome and the Dubai Declaration of these events. And what they basically do is they formulate the demand, they codify the demand, the voice of national statistical offices, national statistical systems. What do they really need to actually support the SDG agenda and the development agenda in the long run? Now, the challenges have become, of course, even more pronounced with the current COVID situation that has done two things: increase on even more the demand for data and quick data, timely data, and integrated data, geospatial data, statistical information, and all. And it may have reduced the funding opportunities for data because, I mean, the fiscal pressure will be felt around the world. So it is all the more important to have a dialogue. How do we manage this situation with high demand and limited or perhaps even decreasing supply? One thing we did in the process was to create the Bern Network, because the Swiss, who are a partner for the third World Data Forum, the first part of it already took place virtually, and the second part will be real later this year, have created with us the Bern Network. And of course, this is very important because it brings for the first time together all of the people who are working in the area of our donors in the field of statistics, because this is a very specialized area. And one thing that we immediately realized with the network is that we speak different languages. We statisticians, we have technical words and demands. And on the donor side, they talk about aid efficiency, they talk about impact, they talk about return of investment, they talk about business case. So I think one of the really important things that has happened in the last couple of years is that we created a joint language and platforms where to talk, and the Bern Network is such an important platform. And who is helping and supporting the Bern Network? And none others than our dear friends from Paris 21, who have been really taking a leadership role in supporting the Bern Network, preparing materials for all of us to look at and to reflect together. So those are the four big actors that are putting this show together for you today: the high-level group, the UN Statistics Division, the Bern Network, and Paris 21. And I can promise you that we have a great agenda, and we will start with the demand perspective, from the country perspective. And in the first segment, hear from a survey that we did at the UN and from the perspective of a country, Malawi, directly. And then in the second segment of this event, we will hear all of the voices, the reflections, the ideas that we have of a clearinghouse. How can we increase resources, perhaps domestically by doing a better business case, internationally by improving our fundraising, and the important question also, how can we better use what we already have, so that with all the good intentions, we don't start stumbling over each other. So there are great ideas, and we want to present them to you. And it is an important moment. I think nobody will disagree to talk about money, money, money. So without further ado, let's jump into our very exciting program. We have a lot of good panelists that will be introduced to you step by step, and I'll do the first part of that job. For the first segment, I have the dubious pleasure of introducing my colleague, Francesca Perucci. And there are rumors out there, she works with me in the UN Statistics Division, and there are rumors out there that we went to statistical kindergarten together, and I can confirm that those rumors are true. So I don't know what I would do in New York without Francesca Perucci. So she will lead us into the first segment. And we will also hear the important voice of a country, Mrs. Mercy Kanyuka, who is the Commissioner of Statistics Malawi. So without further ado, Francesca, over to you.
Thank you so much, Stefan. And from kindergarten to, I don't know what we call this phase, a little bit older, right? But thank you, and good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, wherever you are. A pleasure to be here today and have this discussion on the need for more and better financing for our statistical community. As Stefan already mentioned, of course, the situation is now very different from when we started this dialogue with our colleagues within the Bern Network and within the high-level group for partnership coordination and capacity building, and more broadly with the community with whom we work very closely. Susan, I think you're going to help me with the PowerPoint. So if you want to share that. What I'm going to show you is some highlights of a survey that was undertaken by our statistics division together with the data group from the World Bank, and is a survey that already has had 3 rounds. And the idea was when we started this was to really understand the impact of COVID-19 on the operations and the needs of statistical offices, with the intent of understanding how to better support them and what needed to be done to support them. So if we can go to the first slide, Susan, thank you. So the survey, as I said, had 3, just to put things a little bit in the context, 3 rounds in May, July, and October last year, and we are now in the process of defining the 4th round. And if you want to access, of course, there are full reports available on both our website and the World Bank website. Next slide, thank you. So as I was saying, you know, the impact is what I call, you know, the double burden on national statistical offices. The pandemic has clearly disrupted the regular operations of most, if not all, statistical systems across the globe. And if you look, you know, there's been a slight improvement, for instance, in the ability of countries to undertake face-to-face data collection from May to October, but still in October 2020, we have 74% of countries still had not been able to resume face-to-face data collection. So they had to fully or partly stop those operations. And if you go to the next slide, you see that that is in a moment when national statistical offices were actually asked to play a much bigger role than normally they would play. So in fact, already in July 2020, you see 43% of countries were already sitting at the table with other parts of the government as part of the response groups to the COVID-19. And in October 2020, we see 81% of countries, of national statistical offices were engaging in planning or implementing data collection on COVID-19. So the double burden of having to respond very fast to the increased demand for data amidst a situation, a very difficult situation where most regular statistical operations were disrupted. Next slides, please. So in the middle of that, of course, funding was also affected. So what we see already in May, when we asked whether countries were facing, national statistical offices were facing increased difficulties in operating due to funding limitations. And we see that 28% responded that there were severe limitations, and 59% responded that yes, that was affecting them moderately. So really a very large percentage in low and lower middle income countries that face that difficulties. And then when asked whether the funding had been affected specifically due to the current pandemic, low and lower middle income countries, so a decrease in 53% of the case. So very severe effect in that case. If you can go to the next slide, Susan. So one aspect that is particularly concerning is that we are in the middle of the 2020 population round, of population census round. And we see that although it's overall not such a huge percentage, but financial resources that were initially allocated to the population and housing censuses have been reallocated to other priorities, to other government activities. So overall, it's only 60%. But if you look at low and lower middle income countries, that is as high as almost more than a quarter of countries, actually, which really raises the question: is this going to affect, you know, overall the cycle of population censuses? So it's really a serious concern, as we know, you know, this for most countries is one of the key data sources for a lot of efforts and to inform a lot of policies, and also as a frame for a lot of other data collection tools and approaches. Next, please. So, as I said in the beginning, countries also need to respond to a higher demand for data. And so we see that there is a greater need for funding, in fact. And we say, when we asked in July, that was the second round of survey, whether countries were receiving additional financial support to respond specifically to the COVID-19 needs, there was 44% of NSOs that actually were indeed receiving some funding. But on the other hand, as many as 63% in the same income group were saying that they actually needed additional financial support. And the need for those countries, very much, what we see is the need is even for basic infrastructure. If you want to adopt new methods, new data collection approaches, you need good connectivity, you need, skills, you need the staff that can really implement that, and you need access to all the various tools. And so there is definitely, to be able to respond and have systems that can respond effectively to the new data demand, you need additional funding. If we go to the next, please. So many NSOs have really stepped up to the challenge, and we've seen that. And if you go to the full reports, you'll see the details of that. The really how much NSOs have been able to embrace new methodologies, new technologies, and really tried and established new partnerships with private sector, used mobile phones, all different approaches, trying to really respond to the increased demand and trying to have timely and better disaggregated data. But again, so here you see, for instance, partnerships that were established to access and use technology, to access new data sources, and to develop or implement new methods. And the percentage is very high, well above 60% in most cases. In all income groups, countries have tried to implement that and to establish these new partnerships. But if we go to the next slide, we see that, again, funding has been an issue, and that the proportion of countries that identify the need to secure funding is as an obstacle to establishing these partnerships is as high as 67% among the low and lower middle income countries. So again, funding for these countries to be able to really embrace the new technology, to embrace, the innovation has been an issue, especially now that it's more needed than ever before because of obstacles in implementing the regular data collection operations. Next slide, please. So this is all I wanted to share with you in terms of our funding. Of course, again, there are a lot more details that we have shared with all partners to inform them and to provide the tool for partners to understand how to respond to the crisis and how to collaborate and support national statistical offices around the world. We've shared this with the regional commissions, with all partners with whom we work very closely. But these are some highlights just to give you a sense of how important funding is, more important than ever before, and how much the COVID-19 crisis has exacerbated the inequalities across the world in terms of the ability of national statistical system to respond to these challenges. So of course, we've seen that approaches are very different. Countries, have responded in different ways, although there are some commonalities, especially when it comes to embracing new technologies, new methods. There is clearly a need for co-investment in data systems and infrastructure so that countries can really develop a resilient and very agile data and statistical system to respond to the current crisis, and unfortunately to the many more shocks and crises that might have to address. And of course, domestic resources we've seen have been reallocated to other priority areas, and donors also have seen their own budget reductions under the weight of the pandemic. So there is a need higher than ever before for a collective action and really to make more effective use of whatever funds are available. So I think the discussion today really will focus on that, and thank you so much. I very much look forward to the panelists over the next session of the event today to hear about that. Thank you. Over to you, Jurai.
Thank you so much, Francesca, for that great context and overview of really what is facing national statistical offices and their evolving financing needs in this context. And this brings us very nicely to hear about a country perspective in these challenging circumstances. So I'd like to pass the floor over to Mercy Kanyuka, the Commissioner from Malawi. Commissioner, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I will just do a little bit of introduction, and I hope that my talking points will be shared whilst I speak. My name is Mercy Kanyuka. I am the Commissioner of Statistics from Malawi. And just to give you a picture of Malawi National Statistical Office is still a government department. We are not autonomous yet. We're still a government department. However, we do have statistics units, which in ministries and departments, which are directly below the National Statistical Office. So we do post the statisticians to the ministries. So I'm not sure whether this would be, you'll be able to read. Sincere apologies, I didn't prepare slides, but the write-up or the points will be shared, I'm sure, with the colleagues. If it's not clear, you'll be able to look at the points. So Malawi has been affected, definitely. Since 2020, in April, is when we registered officially first cases of COVID-19. And we've had challenges since. So the specific challenges to National Statistical Office as a result of COVID-19 have been, one, on funding. So statistics continues to suffer from low funding, and this is from government as well as from development partners, more so with the demand for data for COVID-19. So the demand has increased, but still we have not been allocated extra funds to meet that demand. This has worsened with the COVID-19, where resources are reprogrammed. So we've had to reprogram some of the resources. Both the government has had to reduce our funding, as well as some development partners have had to withdraw some money and redirect it to COVID-19 issues, prevention mostly, as well as I think treatment of patients. So on the statistics operations, there have been disruption on the survey program. We had to withdraw teams which were in the field. Where at the time the first case of COVID was noted in Malawi, teams all field teams had to be withdrawn from the field, and we were conducting 3 major surveys. We had to withdraw them all. And 2, we later on, after 2-3 months, when the situation had eased and we were more prepared, we sent the teams back to the field. So that posed a new challenge of additional funding for protecting the data collectors as well as the respondents. So that's the normal now. Whenever we're going to the field, we are providing PPEs for the enumerators as well as the respondents. So we've also had to do some visual electronic interfaces with some respondents, especially in industries, although it is not as effective as the physical interfaces have been in the past. So we've really had to make do with whatever data we have, but obviously posing some quality challenges. Similarly, visual technical assistance with the IMF who are helping us in national accounts and the prices and so on. This technical assistance is being offered visually, and that is really also posing a challenge. And then because when we resumed working, we are now working in shifts, and some people are working from home and so on. So that has impacted deliverables. People are not as committed when they're working from home. So in terms of time, we're delivering slightly later than what would have happened if we were going to work from the office. But the COVID-19 has also exposed the lack of and emphasized the need for reliable administrative data. Surely, we should have just been able to, just analyzing quality data, we should have been able to assess the impact of COVID-19, as well as also looking at even just looking at the prevalence. But we are suddenly coming up with a special service to do this, and this has really highlighted the need for quality data. Not also to mention that there's also, with COVID-19 has also highlighted the need for small area data, lower levels, districts, even lower, like village data. You need that data to be able to track hotspots for a pandemic like or any other crisis. But that has also been highlighted by this COVID-19, which I must admit is maybe a blessing in disguise, because now we are talking about this very low level statistics. How can we come up with such statistics for programming as well as in policy interventions and so on? But what as another challenge is on coordination and collaboration. You know, COVID-19 has demanded detailed data, and that has attracted a number of data producing players. I always call them brief producers of data, who have to be managed to avoid misleading the public. Otherwise, so that has been a challenge. It's a challenge which we are working on, but it has been a challenge. So I'll quickly go through. I know time. I hope I can manage time so that I'm able to quickly go through all the elements which I'm supposed to go through. So responding to the challenges, on reduced funding, NSO has had to prioritize core activities. So we've had to prioritize core activities like data collection of prices and to be able to come up with inflation rate every month. We've had to prioritize that and a few other activities. We've also had to use online survey data collection that we have done. So we are complementing and whenever we are not able to do face-to-face, we are doing the online data collection. But also data dissemination. Whenever results of a survey are out, in the past we would have a big launch, national launch, where we invite the minister and so on, and the minister for us now is the vice president, would have invited him and so on. But now we have to reduce that to minimize the number of people present and also complement it with online dissemination using media, emails, websites, as well as we've also been disseminating even using Zoom platforms. On the ineffective virtual electronic interface with the respondents, we have been following up using phones to improve data quality. On collaboration, on COVID, ineffective collaboration, coordination on COVID matters, they are combined with the capacity for real-time data. So we've had to come up jointly with the various players to come up with a quick survey, online survey, or like the high frequency survey, which we've been conducting with the World Bank to monitor economic and social impact of the pandemic, as well as we are also working towards integration of NSO in the National Committee of COVID-19 data generation. I said at the beginning that National Statistical Office has got officers, statisticians in ministries, and that includes Ministry of Health. So we have a unit, a statistics unit in Ministry of Health, which is also facilitating and offering support for statistics needs. So what are the recommendations? And this is, I think, the most important slide. What are the recommendations? The recommendations are that we should ring-fence the funding for statistical development, where there's a real need for government departments like NSO, and even those which are semi-autonomous, to make sure that we ring-fence how, maybe this is a discussion we will have at this forum. So make sure that we tighten whatever budget is allocated to National Statistical Offices should be protected funding. And then there's modernization and strengthening of NSS in terms of physical and statistical infrastructure. The COVID-19 has caught us unawares, and we really have to strengthen the infrastructure so that we are able to conduct various surveys as well as the data collection initiatives without having to go out to do it. So we need to coordinate financial and technical support to the NSS by development partners to build capacity so that we produce qualitative administrative data for timely policy and program interventions. There's also need to capacity transfer in the utilization of big data. There's big data in Malawi. For example, this mobile data, mobile phones, and so to be able to utilize the same to inform timely policy and program direction. We should also enhance capacity transfer through technical and financial assistance in the design of online service. So it is okay to have online service, but it's to develop the capacity to be able to design that service. So that is something which also need development partners to help us. The capacity building should not be limited to statistics offices. It should all go beyond statistics offices to go also towards policy-making institutions and also the media, so that they're able to interpret statistics for effective publicity. There's a lot of assumption that our media is aware of what is going on. Media is statistics illiterate. They are not. Even some of the policy-making institutions are not as statistical as they are not as literate statistically as we would want them to be. So there's also need to support those two areas. I think I will stop here. My apologies if I've gone through the time, but that's what I wanted to present. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for the excellent overview and for sharing your thoughts on not only what can be done, but what has been done. So some of the ideas and recommendations on how we can address these urgent financing needs facing national statistical offices. I think thank you both to you and Jessica for this overview and this really great deep dive into some of the country experiences, which I think brings us very nicely to the next segment of our event, which is a panel discussion that will look at the latest developments as well as some innovative approaches and ways to financing development data. So as we move from assessing the situation and getting some ideas of the way forward to really looking at some potential solutions that have been developed within the wider community, not just within the Bern Network, as we heard earlier from Stefan, but from other partners in really tackling this very urgent agenda. So let me just flag before I hand over the floor to our moderator that you will have an opportunity for an interactive Q&A session. So to our audience, please do actively feel free to use the Q&A function to submit your questions and let us know who you are asking the question to, so we can better direct your queries. So with that, I would now like to welcome and give the floor to Ms. Shada Badi, who's the Managing Director of Open Data Watch and the moderator of this panel, to get us started with this panel segment. Over to you, Shada.
Thank you. Thanks, Shorai. And it's really my pleasure to welcome everybody. Warm welcome on such a cold day for us in Washington, D.C. And for this segment on latest development, innovative ways for financing development data. You've heard amazing talks from Mercy, from, of course, Francesca and Stefan on the importance of this topic and the urgency of us paying attention to this topic. I just wanted to add that at the global level, when we look at the aid for data from the official development assistance based on the work on the Paris 21, we are not really encouraged that the needle is moving in the right direction for this area. When the world agreed in 2015 on the SDGs, on Sustainable Development Goals, there were a lot of hopes that countries and an international organization will really increase their aid for data. We were encouraged before that for the MDGs, Millennium Development Goals, which ended in 2015. And during that time, because of the MDGs and the global actions around data, we saw an amazing increase in financing between 2006 to 2013. We saw that the aid for statistics actually quadrupled, but unfortunately, we do not see the same level. So when you don't have the funding that's needed for this such a big agenda, we really have to be much more innovative, and we have to be much more collaborative. So this is the topic of today's discussion. We have 4 amazing panelists that I wanted to introduce to you. First, we have Ola Awad. who's the president of the Palestine Central Bureau of Statistics. And of course, as Stefan mentioned, she's also the co-chair of the high-level group. Then we'll have Johannes Juding, executive head of Paris 21. And then we welcome Haishan Fu, director of Development Data Group from the World Bank. And last but not least, we have George Simon Jurlik, who's Director General of the Swiss Federal Statistical Office. We will start with a few opening remarks by each one of our panelists, and then we open it up for Q&A. And as Jurai said, please get busy and give us your questions if you can be succinct, and we will allow enough time to answer as many questions as we can. Let me start by turning to Ola. Ola, you wear two very important hats. One is, of course, as the head of the Palestinian Statistics Office, but also HLG. So I wanted to sort of hear a little bit more on some of the developments and new approaches that you think is helping or is being applied to this topic on the financing for better statistical support. So over to you, Ola. If you could summarize between 5 and 7 minutes, that would be terrific.
Thank you, Shaida. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. I'm really very happy to be with you and to share actually our experience during the COVID-19 pandemic and the ways to move forward. And as Shaida mentioned, I'm actually wearing two hats as the chief statistician of Palestine and the co-chair for the high-level group for SDGs. I will begin speaking about the approaches that we worked to respond to the need of enhancing data financing during the COVID-19 pandemic. But I want to ask you, Shaida, I just shared with the my PowerPoint presentation. Is there, I don't know if Yuray can share it with us. Do you have it, Yuray? Thank you. So thank you very much. So I would like to just mention that during the COVID-19 pandemic, we had new approaches to responding to the crisis and to enhance the data financing during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I just summarized, and I mean, I was, when Mercy was speaking, I was just, I mean, as sisters organizations, we almost were working the same thing and thinking of the same approaches. I may summarize on the way that we approach it was in different levels, on the operational level, on the technical one, and on the communication level. And I want just to highlight that, I mean, although it is a crisis, but for us as National Statistical Organization, it was really an advantage and of an added value to show the importance of our work during such crisis and how we responded to this crisis. On the operational level, we have an immediate safety measures that were taken to ensure the safety and the well-being of all our employees, and we formulated an emergency team to ensure the following up on the statistical work in terms of the technical, administrative, and technological aspects. We had the advantage to invest in the IT infrastructure and in thinking more on how we can work virtually. And this was really an added value. And during this time, during the census that we conducted in 2017, it was collected by the handheld devices, by tablets. And it helped us really very much in also distributing the tablets within our employees so they can really work remotely in their homes. We worked remotely on automation, all the admin procedures using the secure advanced techniques. And we created a hotline, and it was really very helpful, a hotline for phone data requests during the full lockdown. We invested a lot also in the social media tools. You know, during the crisis in the COVID-19 pandemic, everyone was actually virtual. No one could communicate face to face, and we took such an advantage that all the people are communicating virtually, and we invested a lot in utilizing and disseminating our data on in all the social media tools. And it was really very helpful in how we were able to utilize also the available data. On the technical level, we worked very closely with the Prime Minister and the Minister of National Economy and most of the ministries on measuring the economic losses, the economic impact of the crisis, and on a recovery plan on the short term, on the long term, such as the impact on the entrepreneurs and the small size enterprises. Also, we used to work in a very dynamic way in drafting different scenarios on the economic forecast on the losses, and which was done and shared with the government. I think we were the first maybe institution and the most important institution working very closely with the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister office during this time. And the issue, and here it's really very important that we didn't wait to anyone to call for us and to request anything from us. We were actually the creative and the innovative National Statistical Office that we present, and we actually put things on board without actually waiting for anyone to request anything. And we really worked on assessing the impact on the pandemic, on the socioeconomic situation and Palestinian establishment via CATI. The 2020 and 21 statistical plan was revised and priorities were redetermined. On the communication level, we organized and took part in several virtual meetings with the relevant local partners and the relevant international institutions inside Palestine and also on the regional and global level. We were able to develop also new methodologies for conducting the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on the socioeconomic conditions of Palestinian household survey and the rapid assessment survey to measure the impact of COVID-19 on business pulse survey with the cooperation and coordination of the World Bank. We participated in a number of virtual webinars and Twitter chats with the UNSD and other international partners to discuss the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on statistical offices and the increased demand on statistics and the best practices that we can benefit from. A PCBS in cooperation also with the UNSD FCDO project on SDG monitoring. It was such a very helpful project that we were able to launch a special website to include all data on COVID-19 pandemic in Palestine, and has included data from different sources. Diversifying data dissemination and communication policies, strategies and tools, social media networks, the big data and open data to increase the access of data and maximize the use of statistics in all fields and make it available for all community segments.
Ola, can you wrap up? Thank you so much.
Yeah, I may just mention, Shaida, just on the level of updating on the high level group on the work on financing data. Yuray, can I just get the second slide, please? Thank you. In my capacity as the co-chair for the high level group, I will give a brief background on the group work on the financing and the CTGAP topics. The CTGAP was launched at the first UN World Data Forum in January 2017 and contained 6 strategic areas and 66 underlying key actions. This was followed by the Dubai Declaration, launched at the Second World Data Forum in 2018, calling for an innovative funding mechanism to support the strategic areas and actions under the CTGAP. The high-level group, as the custodian for the 2 declarations of the previous UN World Data Forums, formed 2 active subgroups working on the financing and implementation of the Cape Town Global Action Plan CTGAP. These subgroups consisted of members from Hungary, Mexico, South Africa, the United Kingdom, Paris 21, and the UNSD, and have submitted several documents, including recommendations of the implementation of the CTGAP and the way forward. However, and since the CTGAP will be 5 years old in 2022, we have to ask ourselves, is it still viable? For this purpose, and because of the listed 3 triggers, the group will be proposing a merger between the 2 subgroups to conduct a full review on the CTGAP, which will include not only the national statistical organizations and the national statistical system members, but new partners of the data community. The subgroups prepared several background documents on the CTGAP and the financing of data, which are available on the UNSD website. The development of a financing, the funding mechanism for statistical capacity building of national statistical systems to support evidence-based follow-up and review of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development of 2018. Better data for sustainable development implementation, the Cape Town Global Action Plan for data for the 2030 Agenda. The financing for data and statistics, enrich the national statistical systems to support the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, joint survey on new approaches to capacity development and future priorities, which was conducted by Paris 21. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ola, and thanks for wearing both hats and telling us about the how innovative the Palestinian Statistical Office is being, and also the work of the HLG, and really glad to see how HLG actively working on the financing side of the Cape Town Global Action Plan. Now let's turn our attention to Paris 21 and Johannes Juding. Johannes is gonna tell us some of the really latest exciting work that the Secretariat for the Bern Network Paris 21 is doing in leading the effort towards a clearinghouse. Won't say anything more about it and just give him the floor. Johannes, if you can do this in about 10 minutes or 12 minutes, we would appreciate it. I want to leave enough time for questions. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Shaida. Thank you so much. Good morning. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very excited to be present and present this clearinghouse for financing development data. I think this presentation follows very nicely what we have heard so far. If we step back for a second, I think the presentation by Francesca has shown us the immense need for more and better funding that is needed for national statistical offices, in particular in poor countries. And we just heard from Mercy and from Ola how statistical offices are actually adapting to the new situation, which of course is very difficult and very complicated due to COVID. So the presentation here, the clearinghouse, is an attempt to try to address some of those problems. Can we have the next slide, please? So let me situate this idea of a clearinghouse into the context that Stefan and others have already mentioned. So you basically, I mean, we have a longer conversation about the need for more and better funding. And I think we have also some very good plans how to do it. And the key problem that we are facing is in the area of data financing, development data financing, are maybe 4. One is certainly that we have a lack of transparency of activities and of funding. Many donors often request that despite the available data that is out there from the OECD, from Paris 21, from IATI and others, that still the data is not timely enough and it's not granular enough. And that there is really a need for improving the availability and the transparency of the data that goes, of the funding and of the money that goes out to countries. Second is that linked to this, to some extent, missing coordination is the fragmentation. So in some countries, we see eventually an oversupply in funds, and in some countries, we see aid orphans. And it would be very good to think about a mechanism how this can be solved. And then another problem that has also come up in the presentation earlier, and I think has been mentioned by Mercy and others, is the alignment between international priorities to national country priorities. And often there is a mismatch. So there are certain activities a country wants to do and has in its national development plan, while on the other hand, there is the international idea, there is the international goals that request certain data collection. And then last but not least, there is a reliable costing challenge. So to some extent, the idea of a clearinghouse, one has to think a little bit like a matchmaking platform between, on the one hand, the supply of money and support from international and national donors, and on the other hand, the demand side of countries. And what is really exciting, what we have learned over the last months in discussion with actually many of you, is to see that in particular to showcase what works at the country level. How can Malawi, how can Palestine, how can other countries mobilize their own resources? How can they improve their own national funding? How can they use the information available to make better informed decisions with their planning ministers on funding? Next slide, please. So what does this idea of a clearinghouse, what will it do? And we are about to develop it. So your support as part of the Bern Network is really greatly appreciated. And I will show you at the end an email, and you can find us. So please engage in this conversation. So first of all, to counter the challenges that we were just talking about. So on the one hand, increasing funding, but also make a better use of existing funds is maybe 5 points. One is a visualization. We can use modern forms of APIs and data sourcing techniques to be better aware, to provide decision makers better, more timely, more granular information on what's going on in funding for development data, which will allow the decision makers and those who make those decisions to do nowcasting and forecasting. We also can provide, and here the OECD has taken the lead, for donor profiles to be zooming into how, in which countries, in which areas donors are currently investing, and also do this for countries. And then a very important point is about good practices. How can one convince a planning minister to invest more in data and statistics? I think we are all convinced that it's a need, but we don't really know how to do it. But there are some good examples. For instance, I quote here Rwanda, who has really ramped up significantly domestic resources for data and statistics over the last 15 years. So what are good practices? Can we learn from peer exchange? And last but not least, we should make those resources available. Next slide, please. So one more. So this is just a mock-up. So this is, how would it all look like? I mean, this data, this platform of the clearinghouse. So the first was the landing page. Can we go back a little bit once more to the beginning, please? That was a bit quick. So the first one is really where you would land. And these are mock-ups that are going to be further developed. And you would see, on the one hand, you would see above, you see tracking funding flows, discovery funding opportunities, engage with partners and finding key resources. The partners would be listed. And you can find on the left-hand side information relevant to your specific region, to your specific country, to your specific partner or specific sectors. It would be all very much SDG compliant. So if you would look for specific funding deficits for development data in specific areas, you could start to enter this from this slide. Next slide, please. This is just a mock-up and with dummy data from Rwanda. And it shows you, at least it gives you an idea, how could it look for a given country. And we could also put Malawi, Palestine. So this clearinghouse would allow, first of all, for the countries themselves to have a better understanding, where does the money come from for supporting data and statistics? Is it from bilateral donors? Is it from international donors? Is it from philanthropy? Or from which kind of sources is it? And also, where does it go? Does it go in specific sectors like nutrition, disability, biodiversity, gender equality? And you would give an overview, and it would allow you to get an overview of existing funding opportunities, and hopefully also in time of trends. So you could see over time where priorities are shifting. And you could also then have a look in a given countries, who are the most important donors in that specific country. Next slide, please. So this is funding opportunities. Often there is an overall available money in a given country, but then we don't know exactly where is it going. Do we need to fund a census? I mean, Francesca has mentioned that in many countries now a census is needed and required. Do we need to invest in household surveys or in big data? Do we have a lack in education financing? So through this sourced in data that is partly already available, that is partly needs to be collected, you can have information about what is already funded and where we need more funds. Next slide, please. The other great thing of this clearinghouse would be to allow partners who are engaging in this. This could be from international partners, could be from the Norwegian aid agency NORAD, to Swiss agencies, to national statistical offices, to Bill and Melinda Gates foundations, to local NGOs. You could set up partner pages who provide support and who where you would have an entry point to understand what kind of activities these partners are supporting and where they are active. And this could then, of course, be matched with the country pages. Next slide, please. This is and here I come already. I know it's really I could talk for an hour, but Shaida wouldn't let me do this. But I'm really so excited about this. This is the what we call the gender channel. You could also do this this clearinghouse set up by specific focusing on gender equality. I mean, while Shaida is of course right that the needle needs to move with overall funding, the good news is on gender data and statistics, we have seen more money available. In particular from institutions like Bill and Melinda Gates and a few other philanthropic organizations, but also from international organizations. And this would be could be reflected in this gender channel of the clearinghouse. We could also imagine a CRVS channel, a civil registration and vital statistics channel. So this would be in parallel cutting through these clearinghouse, and would also allow us to have a good understanding of how much currently the international community is spending on such an important topic. Next slide. So this is just to basically provide you a few snapshots. Probably you have more questions than answers now, but I hope I have waken up your appetite. This is time we are currently developing it. So this is really part of this international processes that all of us referring to. It's part of it's a direct outcome of the high-level groups conversation. There is a very close link to the work by, and we will listen to this in a minute, by Haishan from the World Bank. It's very complementary to the work that the OECD is doing and the aid effectiveness community. So in that sense, it's really, the innovation would really come from bringing both together, the supply side and the demand side. And in particular, also this very recent development with the UN resident coordinators, where we could link to really bundle the information and make the information that is already available at the country level to have this better put out for everybody accessible. So with this, Shaida, I believe I stayed more or less in the 10-minute slide. I hope I was convincing, and I wanted to give the floor back to you. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you. Thanks, Johannes. And yes, I think you were very convincing, showing that the clearinghouse is really a way forward for us as a platform for collaboration, information sharing, bringing, all the countries' voice from the demand side into the picture. And of course, adding more information on the supply side. So I think it's really, really promising and important initiative. And I hope we will get the collaborations from all the organizations that are attending here, and we could really make this bigger than sum of parts. So with that said, I'll go to Haishan. Haishan, as you know, has a very important role at the World Bank. The World Bank is one of the largest, is in fact the largest multilateral organization in supporting statistics, and it's been doing it for many, many years. So of course, we look to the World Bank for not only for funding, but for innovations, for ideas, and many more. So I'm going to turn to Haishan to give us a little bit briefing on what's going on, what's the state of play at the World Bank on financing for statistics. Over to you, Haishan, 7 minutes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Shaida. It's really wonderful to join all of you. In a way, I think we have been talking together about financing for data, or better financing for data, for some time. Sometimes I even feel that we're talking to the converted, but I really think our experience under the COVID and our joint effort in response to the COVID pandemic has made 3 messages very clear that really worth reiterating among us. First, we're very happy that we were able to work with over 30 UN agencies and international organizations during the last year on 2 editions of a joint report, how COVID-19 is changing the world, a statistical perspective. This report shared rapid assessment of the cascading impact of the pandemic, from loss of lives to loss of livelihood, from reversal of poverty reduction to the loss of gains in human development in many areas. But clearly the pandemic presents tough choices to national, regional, international, and local communities in many sectors, including on families and business that are forced to make tough choices, especially in terms of how scarce resources should be allocated. So this is really a time the world more than ever need more reliable, trustworthy, and accessible data and statistics to inform those important decisions. So here is really the first message we should continue to stress. That is, despite the fast evolving data ecosystems, data generated by the public sector, by the government data agencies, remain foundational and fundamental to our development decision making. So the reason why all those international organizations could come together to provide those rapid assessment is precisely because the existing long-term investment that have been made by the national governments and international community into the field of statistics. So that is the message we need to keep on pondering and make it very clear to our policymakers. But unfortunately, the pandemic is also posing a significant challenge to these vital areas of development. We have heard from Francesca. We're very happy to have joined forces to conduct 3 rounds of the global online surveys of national statistics offices, both to understand what's happening in terms of the disruption to the national statistical operations, but also hoping to inform development partners in how they prioritize their support to countries. But as we can see, that really at a time when the demand for better data is increasing, many of those countries, especially low and lower middle income countries, are suffering. So this COVID has really heightened the urgency to bring national data system into the digital age with the right balance between openness and reusability of the data and the protection of privacy and rights, in order to make sure that we have the right information at the right time. So this is indeed the second message I also want to stress, is the COVID pandemic is widening the global data inequality, which in turn could further widen the gaps in the ability of governments to make informed decisions, especially at a time of crisis. And this in turn could also further widen the global inequality in many dimensions. So there's no doubt, if we want to really manage the crisis and seek build back better, we must invest in statistical and data systems, both in terms of national governments and international development community. While we were responding to the COVID pandemic in many different ways, I'm also glad to see the bank team has been intensively working on the forthcoming World Development Report, which is on data. For the first time, it's a report devoted to data. It's called Data for Better Lives. And through this preparation of the report, we really recognized very clearly that in this age and time, as the world is rapidly digitized and datafied, everything we do is based on data, and everything we do generate data. So the notion that data is really a productive asset that powers much of the private sector growth, and data is a strategic shared asset, and the public sector must increasingly invest in and make better use of, has really taken hold. There are different kind of data that we need, not only to monitoring trends and disruptions, but also to inform strategic prioritization and designing of specific programs and monitor their effectiveness and to do course correction. But more importantly, we also need data that allow us to target localized and individualized actions to reach those who are most in need. That's why that the kind of data we're talking about is increasingly expanding in scope and also deepening in granularity. That's why we're saying that we need all hands on deck in this critical time. That meant that really both public sector generated data and private sector generated data need to come together in order to be made the best use of to inform our decision making. So we need to both push for the foundational produced by the public sector and also connecting with the frontier that is now led by the private sector. So this is really the third message and embedding why we need better investment. Is because that in this troubled times lies ahead, really timely and accurate data is our sure bet to lead us out of the crisis and leaving no one behind. This is also when we must build the true public and private partnership and work together to create global consensus on the principles, the legal arrangements, the practical tools for effective data governance, data protection, data integration in order to help countries to build the capacity to best use those data responsibly and impactfully. So it's really against all this backdrop with this very compelling need for us to invest in data. I'm really glad to see the World Bank has also been scaling up its investment to support client countries. Such support are in different areas. Just before the pandemic hit all of us at the beginning of last year, it's really great to see that in December 2019, the World Bank the IDA replenishment for the first time introduced a horizontal policy commitment. It's called Data for Policy that required the bank to channel IDA financing to low and lower middle income countries in order to improve some of the most basic data for development policy making, including a commitment to invest in 30 countries through improvement of censuses and surveys and others. This is part of a record 82 billion IDA replenishment, which will guide us in the next 3 to 4 or 5 years. And I'm very happy that not only in terms of data for policy commitment, along other sectoral IDA commitment, there are also very strong policy investment commitment in terms of supporting better data that is in the geospatial areas, in the openness in government data accessibility, in improving the capacity of the population in using data, so on and so forth. Just last year alone, there were 2.6 billion investment in data and statistical projects. But of course, this is only a good start. There's so much more need to be done. That's why I'm really looking forward to March 24th, when the World Development Report, Data for Better Lives, will be launched. I think that with its strong set of recommendations will continue to guide the World Bank to channel its IDA and IBRD investment to support client countries. And I really hope that we can really have a systematic look at how the investment need to be structured so that we can support the overall data system in countries, including strengthening the capacity of NSOs as is desperately needed. The second area that we are scaling up our effort is in launching the new global data facility. As we have talked about this quite a few times in the past year and a half, in response to the high-level group's call for a new innovative funding mechanism to help channel better and more financing to support the implementation of the Cape Town Global Action Plan, the World Bank took up the challenge, but more important is build upon the role that it has been established over the past couple of decades, including under the leadership of Shida, in creating trust fund, multi-donor trust fund to leverage with IDA investment to support not only the global public goods investment, especially in this time of age, innovation in the data technology applications is so pressing and opportunities are wide. We need this global data facility to really support or supplement domestic investment and IDA and RD type of investment in countries. And I'm just very happy to say that after a lengthy period of preparation and taking into account the considerations that in the report prepared by Paris 21 and the Bern Network, we are right at the cusp of setting up this global data facility. And I know this is a very pressing time, but it's also a challenging time to allow us to reach out to all the donors, to pool their resources together, to use this facility as a mechanism for coordinating investment into countries, and also to do joint prioritization to target some of the critical areas that desperately need such financing. With that, I'm also very happy to see that it's not financing per se, but it's about really creating new development data partnership by connecting public sector, international agencies with private companies through development data partnership is co-created with World Bank, IMF, IADB. Now that OECD has joined forces, we have been able to secure agreements through harmonized legal agreement with over 25 private companies to access their data to help inform our operational needs so that we can best support client countries in different areas. But it's very important for us to now look into how we can raise some resources to help countries to develop such partnership at country level, so that some of the innovations we have already seen through the COVID time, as Palestine has described, could be materialized at larger scale, so that we can really truly tap into the full potential of public sector generated data and private sector generated data, and allow them to be integrated and used responsibly under the right governance arrangement, so that we can seek the best impact to countries. And here I must applaud Paris 21 for having created this new clearinghouse platform I think it's very, very important that this platform would connect with this kind of joint resource commitment, and also clear commitment by bilateral and multilateral development partners, so that it's not only the clearinghouse will serve as information sharing, but also really as a tool to hold all of us accountable to direct the right investment to the right places to serve country needs. So with that, Shaida, let me just stop.
Thank you. Thanks, Haishan. Really good, good news from reporting from the World Bank side, and so happy to hear about the launch of the WDR, and that it would really help us to build the foundation of discussions around what would take to have a more sustainable system for financing for statistics. So really glad to hear that. I'm going to turn to, we're really short of time. I've done a terrible job of managing time. So I'm sorry, but very important discussions on hearing from you all. So I'm turning to George. George, you can give us your perspective from where you are and all the good things that you have done. I know there's not enough time for you to say all that, but give us a summary. I'll come back for a round of questions to all the panelists before we wrap it up. Over to you, George.
Thank you very much, Shaida. I will look that I'm not talking too long, but I'm bringing to the essential what I want to say. So thank you so much for inviting me. First, let me thank the colleagues, Ola, Johannes, and also Haishan for their great interventions. In addition, it's a pleasure to be here virtually with all you today and talk about the financing for development data. I would like to add some inputs for the subject. However, it's not an easy task to add further elements after those three experts from our colleagues. As we know, the implementation of the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development requires disaggregated, high quality and timely data. So this is especially in the poorest country that those data are missing. So government is in those countries lack the resources to build strong statistical systems. Missing data reduces the ability of countries to design and implement policies and programs, spot opportunities, avoid risk, and monitoring progresses. So we need to close these gaps and those gaps. We need the resources to build up and maintain a globally harmonized statistical system. As already mentioned before, the Cape Town Global Action Plan for Sustainable Development Data identifies strategic areas that need strengthened and serves as a framework for investment. So following on that, the Dubai Declaration calls for the establishment of a funding mechanism to mobilize domestic and international funds to strengthen the capacity of national data and statistical systems. So the declaration recognized that innovative funding strategies are critical for successful implementation of the Cape Town Global Action Plan. As a way forward in this direction, the Bern Network actually was an idea from Stefan, created by promoting more and better financing for data almost 2 years from ago. As one of these actors supporting the launch of Bern Network, we still are convinced of its importance. Together with the investments of our colleagues from the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, we are ready to reiterate our support. Moreover, as 2030 approaches, we need the Bern Network work more than ever to present solutions on how we can use more efficiently the resources currently available. So the Bern Network recognizes indeed that a multi-stakeholder approach is really critical to improve the amount and effectiveness of financing for data and statistics for development. The Bern Network includes not only statistical officers, but also key for us, the donors. So it is great to have such a diverse panel and to see with the Clearinghouse mentioned by Johannes a few minutes ago, how far the network has come since it was created in January 2019. Maybe additionally, I want to support what Johannes was saying, that the Clearinghouse present a practical way-driven mechanism to improve coordination, which is a central challenge for better and maybe more funding for data. Therefore, the Clearinghouse, we all can support the implementation of the Cape Town Global Action Plan by addressing information gaps. However, even if the Clearinghouse is a good start, it will not be enough to overcome challenges regarding funding. We know if you use the existing resources more efficiently, it will be still not be enough to build and maintain a global system. And as I said, Switzerland supports initiatives which will be a step forward for more and better funding. We therefore welcome the activities, of course, of the World Bank and the next steps covered by the Bern Network that will bring us all together, signing a data compact in October this year. This data compact should be a clear message to all decision makers that more data is crucial to have evidence-based decision making. So to conclude and be in time, Switzerland is really supporting and will continue to support this discussion with our project Road to Bern. We have already achieved a lot, and through all we are going to achieve in 2021. We hope and are confident we will be able to show concrete results at the UN World Data Forum in Bern. So thank you very much. Back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, George. And thanks from all of us to you and to the Swiss government for all the support and being so patient with us through this process. So really appreciate that and the support for the Clearinghouse and for the Bern Network. So I'm going to come, I have only 5 minutes, so I'm going to come to you, to the panelists. There are a number of good questions. I hope some of you can actually type some answers. Ola, there's a question for you on the impact of COVID on data quality. There's questions on, have we explored new sources of funding and, and going to the market, for example, for capital market type of source of funding. There are questions on how can we build better synergies between, some of the existing funding, and I think Haishan answered some of that on the funding between the trust fund and the IDA 19. So there are lots of questions in there that you have already answered. But I just wanted to sum up all the various questions and come back to you with one question on whether, from what you've heard from the list of questions and whether what you've heard from your colleagues, do you think we are on the right track for this collective action towards improving investment in data? Collective action, for what I mean is both at the international level, but at the country level. Is there one more action that you think is really necessary, whether with the Clearinghouse or whether with, more coordination at the country level, whether we need to focus more to some sectors which are falling behind in the international level? So, coming back to you to sort of see whether we are on, criticize us. Are we on the right track? Are this what we have talked about would work or not? So I'm going to start from Johannes, and then maybe I can move to Ola and to George, and then end with Haishan. Haishan, you will have the last word. And of course, if Stefan and Francesca want to talk about, to mention that, I would be really grateful. So Johannes, starting with you. 1 minute, please.
Well, thank you so much, Shaida. Tough question. No, I think we are on the right track, but we are not yet there. And I wanted to build on what George just said, which I think is a very important point. The Clearinghouse and what we have heard is one important element for more effective spending of existing resources. However, as we have all heard, and I think Haishan has it made very clear, I mean, there's much, and I saw some interesting questions about linking demand to bond development and to financial market development. There is a huge untapped sort of need for more and better funding. So we are, in that sense, Shaida, we are just at the beginning. Now, one idea that I wanted to put forward that we have also discussed, but maybe we should think a bit more about this, is to show the value of data and the value of statistics for society in financial terms. I think we can see in this COVID crisis one thing, that quality information makes a difference. There is tons of data and statistics out there. That's not the point. I mean, we have possibly, the WHO director is speaking about an infodemic. It's a problem, it's to some extent. What we need is intermediaries who can put all that information, all that noise into sense, into making sense, quality data, quality statistics, and here national statistical offices can play a leading role. Yet we still have to step up. We have to make it clear. We have to show the value for societies. And we also maybe need to put financial terms to it. We have to measure it. We have to show to the finance minister, here is what you get with better information. Lockdown, yes or no, in a given situation. You have to compile different data sources, good quality data sources. So I think it's our opportunity now to show the value of data, to measure the value of data, and then to combine this with better spending, with quality spending, and then also to increase the capacities of the poor countries. I hope I've stayed in the 1 minute. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. Ola, over to you. 1 minute.
Thank you, Shaida, and thank you for the question regarding if I can specify the response rate and the reliability margin for the impact for the pandemic on the quality of PCBS data. Actually, I'm going to say it was such a marvelous learning process, and it was out of the box, and we didn't expect that. I mean, the way actually to deal with the phone, with the call is very much different, but it was also impressive. And I can say that, for example, the response rate was about 80 to 85%, which was for us really very high. And for the statistical error, it was less than 5%. And even for the bias, it was about 1%. So what I'm saying, it's really very important to think out of the box. For us, it was a fear, but it was such a marvelous way to move forward and to overcome the challenge. And I may say that this is part of the modernization that we want to move even after the pandemic. Thank you.
Thanks, Ola. George, over to you. Can we go back to the question on the collective actions, and do we think we are on the right track, and how can we actually, have a higher impact through the Road to Bern event on this collective action?
Thank you, Shaida. This is not so an easy question to answer, because actually the question is, when are we there and where do we go actually? And I think the most important element is that we're committed to going this way together. Also, our behavior going this way together is that we learn from each other, and everybody gives his know-how in that. And I think we just started. I mean, Jonas was mentioning that we are at the point that we've seen that we just will reach another level if we work together, listen to each other, and then try to produce solution together. And I think that what we do here is that we bring in some kind of a basic resource, I would say, ability to go this way together. But this is, of course, not the end of the journey. It's just the beginning of it. And what we have to do is that we are all ambassadors for this topic, and we have to go to other people there where the music is playing, and then tell them that it's important to work together. And someone needs to lead also a bit on that way. And I think the Bern Network can show a action, and we have to get in a lot more people than what are now on that track. But I think we already started quite well, so we just have to multiply this.
Thank you, George. That's terrific. And that this is work in progress, and we also need to keep an eye on what the outcome we want to achieve, and how do you actually measure the outcome that we want to achieve. We haven't even addressed that. It's a whole different topic. Is Haishan with us? Haishan, can I turn to you? Did we lose Haishan? It looks like she has left the session. Jorai, is Haishan around? So is that, maybe I can come to Stefan or Francesca. Do you think, Stefan, do you think from your perspective on this collective action towards better and more financing for data, are we on the right track? Are you happy how things are moving? Or do you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning worrying that we are on the wrong track?
Thanks. Very briefly, I think we are on the right track, and I'm very happy on the small but important contribution that we as a UN have made using our convening power, bringing all the right people together in one big room. I mean, even this event is that finally a very diverse community has to learn talking to each other. So that was our main contribution, and I think in that sense we are on the right track. Do I wake up at 2 o'clock? Yes, sometimes. And I feel a little bit like when I'm as an old man still trying to run a marathon. I wish I could go a little bit faster. And I know it's still a long way to go. And yes, I think we do need to find ways of acceleration. The one thing that I sometimes think to myself, I wish we had more and more compelling example of how I feel we are always asking for alimony and begging that we're getting money for data. I think we really need to become much tougher and show examples where when there was an accident and there was not a good set of supporting data, a lot of money was lost. I would like to make that argument much more stronger that a good investment into data actually saves you money. And I think there we haven't really found the right examples. And perhaps sometimes we have to be brave and speak up and show that maybe governments in the past made mistakes and set on the wrong horse because they had the wrong data. And ultimately it ended up costing a lot of money. So if we could have a couple of those very compelling examples that we could show that we are not asking for alimony, but we are offering an investment that can actually save you a lot of money, I think we would have perhaps stronger arguments in the dialogues with politicians and donors.
Thank you, Stefan. And that's really important, showing the value for investment. Haishan keeps on coming in and dropping off. So I'm going to give the last word to Francesca. Francesca, any thoughts before we end this segment on whether we are on the right track? And then I'll hand it in to Johannes.
Thanks so much, Shada. Yes, perhaps just 3 points. I totally agree with Stefan. We need to go faster, and we need to, it's always been a challenge to show the value of data and to show donors how important it is and the value they get in return for the money. And I think we need to do a better job. And I really see that the Clearinghouse as one opportunity to do that and to really provide a clear link between what is provided and what the outcome is. Number 2 point, and that was raised in one of the questions, how do we use the Clearinghouse to also increase domestic resources? And I think we are on the right track on that too. I think the Clearinghouse really provide the space for that, to really also raise domestic resources and have the co-investments on data. And last but not least, someone asked about GGIM and how do we engage with the geospatial community? We do engage with the geospatial community, and I think that, again, the Clearinghouse putting countries also on the forefront with their own priorities, and countries are using geospatial information both from the point of view of geocoded data and Earth observations very, very widely. So it's all part of the same community. So all the new data sources, the geospatial community, they're all part of the same, and there will be priorities addressed by the Clearinghouse. I'm sure there will be the right space to link all these different demands. And thank you. Thank you, Shada.
Thanks, Francesca, and thanks for, there's been really rich set of questions that's coming to us, and now we're trying to answer them through chat, but you know, the audience, you already know who's who and how you easy to reach us for any specific questions or sharing of the material that we have presented here. I'm not going to try to wrap up these really rich discussions, but just to say that I'm really encouraged myself to see that we are making progress towards this innovation for enhancing financing for data, and thank all the panelists for great work that they have done. I'm going to turn it over to Johannes to introduce our last speaker. Thank you very much from my side.
Thank you very much, Shada, for this excellent sharing of this panel. I'm very delighted to introduce to us Bart Berger-Solhjell. He is the Director General of the Norwegian Development Cooperation Agency, NORAD. I think he has a distinguished career. He was Minister of Education and Environment of Norway. And it will be very exciting for us to hear his perspective. I mean, we have been talking a lot from the perspective of statisticians and those people who work from the side of data. And Bart has a long-standing experience also be a politician. So I couldn't be a better place having him speaking last in this event. So Bart, can I please hand the floor over to you?
You may. Thank you, and thanks for all those all too kind words. And it's a great pleasure to be with you here. It's been an honor really, and really inspiring to follow the full event. And maybe it's only fitting to end the event by where it started, you know, in statistical kindergarten, where I understand Stefan and Francesca met some years ago. I would say that probably is. I didn't attend the statistical kindergarten myself, but I did attend statistical high school. Actually, evil tongues have it, I never really graduated from statistical high school, and that I'm still acting like data is my life. I tell them, you know, that truth is data is the basis for most development, whether it be in Norway or globally. And I wanted maybe to sum up this by also returning to something Haishan Fu mentioned briefly, that, you know, we are the converted in a way. So how do we convert more people? Like any missionary religion, we have to ask ourselves that question. And let me reflect a little bit on that also because of the funding discussion that's been here. I was looking a bit at the numbers, you know, aid budgets are relatively flat. And there will be probably a tendency, like in 2020, for extra funding to health issues. I mean, you couldn't really argue that, taken from other things. And also when it comes to data funding or funding for statistical measures and data, there's no huge upward tendency, at least. So what can we do? Well, and let me firstly say that I think that a really important thing is to make the case even more convincingly to my former colleagues, the politicians, and to make politicians and other leaders and practitioners understand that good data, it's not in the periphery, it's at the heart of development and growth. And it was for developed countries also. I sometimes say that, you know, Norway is not rich because of oil. We're rich because of good data, even though oil helped, I have to admit that. But you know, good data made it possible to do wise political choices. It made us have a competent civil service. It made us do better private investments from all companies and so on. And like you will know from so many other countries, having your facts right has been essential at the heart of development. And in certain ways, data are the roads or railroads or airports of the 2020s. And I think this case is extremely important to make to our political leaders. And then also, I mean, how we do our funding and what we can do is important. And I think at least when I talk to ministers and others in Norway, I always make the case that investing in data is really cost efficient. You get a lot for really small investments compared to many other development investments where there are billions involved if you want to make an impact. Because you invest in the basic infrastructure, and quite small amounts can make a difference. In Norway, we've always also decided to invest through competence sharing. We have an institution called the Knowledge Bank within Norad, where we work with competence programs with our partners. That could be in managing natural resources like oil or fish, for instance. It could be through tax collecting, sharing competence on that, also on data. And that's also an interesting way, of course, like many of you will know, to bringing your the national statistical institutions and other competence institutions into play, where there is a lot of engagement and competence also. Then I mean, many of you have mentioned Johannes's presentation of the Clearinghouse, and I would agree that this is one example of a great coordination and financing measure. I totally welcome it. It will require national ownership, let me say that, and buy-in. I think that's really essential for the initiative to succeed. But I do think these kinds of platforms where you can have peer learning and where you can have south-south exchanges and you can have ways of competence capital needs to find each other is a great step forward. And I really look forward also to seeing an even more developed version of finalized platform. Then let me add that, I mean, ODA funding is, of course, will be important. I think it will be essential in the future also, but there is also a need beyond ODA. If we look at the capital flows now from OECD countries to developing countries, private funding has become a big part of that. Of course, remittances and so on, but also still funding in developing countries is of course more important for developing countries after all than both capital flows from FDI or ODA. So ownership and long-term investments where we can play a role as partners from the national statistical development strategies is really important. I also believe that innovative partnerships and a role for companies and other actors who do work with data and have knowledge, that we should be open to looking into ways of working collaboratively with them in the future. So just let me end by saying that being among the converted is always great, and also it's not only inspiring, you learn a lot, and I think it's also time for us all to get the message out to others that data and statistical and work with basic statistical work is an essential part of a bigger development paradigm that our politicians and our institutions should be driving. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Bart. This couldn't have been better placed, your intervention at the end of this of our seminar here. This was really great to hear your support. In particular, I have to say I appreciated you mentioning also the need for foundational data. I think there's a lot of people now talking about the need to invest in health systems and in health data. But if you think it through, I mean, for designing recovery policies, we also need data on employment, on trade, on agriculture, on anything else. So better to invest right away into foundational systems data, which is sometimes so difficult to make the case. And I think you were giving us some good points of reflection of how we can do this better. And we would be very open and interested to have you as somebody who is converted to help us to reach even closer to some of your colleagues, for instance, other director generals of 8 of your colleagues in the DAC, for instance, that this could be brought to the DAC. This could be, we have a couple of entry points here, which we may want to continue to influence. I think that the topic of data and statistics and financing, I was just reading this morning, the Financial Times. Every other day, there's now an article about data and the need for better data. Sometimes it's, as we just discussed also, the quality matters a lot, but there is a societal interest now in data. There are many people now talking about infection rates. Even my son start to struggle around with R values and is it good and is it bad? So we have an opportunity here. I think we should use this opportunity to reach out and with people, Bart, if you can be part of this converted group that wants to march on and help us, that would be wonderful. So I would like to thank everybody for joining, for keeping on a little bit longer. Apologies for this. And the last word has our MC, Jurai. Jurai, can I give you the last word to say goodbye? Thank you.
Thank you, Hannes, and thank you so much to all the speakers for this discussion. We have gone a little bit over time, but our participants are still with us. And I think that goes to show how much importance people place in this topic and how urgent the need is to move the needle, Shada, as you said, on this topic of more and better funding for development data. We've come out of this, I think, with a really great understanding, not only of what the state of play is here, but also a good overview and some encouraging ideas around what's happening to push this forward and what the opportunity is, looking at some of the gaps maybe on how we can continue as not just this statistical community, but bridging with others, how we can move forward on the road to Bern, Georges, as you said. So thank you on behalf of all the co-organizers, to you as speakers, to the panelists, but not least to our audience, who has been extremely engaged in the Q&A, giving really great comments, really good questions, and we look forward to connecting with you after this event also. Please feel free to reach out to us at the Bern Network email at any time to continue sharing your thoughts, and also to get involved in some of the activities, including the Clearinghouse, as we move forward to developing that. So just before I close, I do want to highlight that there will be another side event next week on Bern 2021, and I look forward to the UN World Data Forum. So as you know, this event today was part of the Road to Bern process, looking towards the World Data Forum this October. So for those of you who are interested to find out what's being planned for the October Forum, we really invite you warmly to tune in to this event, which will take place on Thursday, the 18th, from 9 to 10:15 New York time. So we will paste the link in the Q&A and the chat so you can connect and find more details to register. So with that, I would like to thank you all again and bring this session to a close. We wish you all a very good rest of the day wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much and bye.